All right, this is a long time coming, coming back to ESO after, doing our yearly ESO return, I should say. I want to make this video just because we always see people putting out ESO build videos, and it's kind of the notion of giving a man a fish and not teaching them how to fish. This is more of how to theory craft and set up builds for PvP, and why you should be using the UESP build editor. Mainly, there's big benefits, and you always see people asking, "Oh, should I run this Mundus? Should I run this enchant, that enchant? What food should I run? Is this set better than that set?" There's all these questions that people have, and a lot of the times they're very, very easily answered. Um, and UESP can help facilitate that. It's very easy to swap out sets, and you can put them side by side, create copies of builds, change one on one, look at the other. There's a lot of ways to play around and get a simple answer for a lot of things. Now, kind of what the build editor is not all encompassing. There are things that are impossible on the build editor. For instance, in PvP, it's really easy to figure out if a dot or if a direct damage, single target is better than another direct single target. The build editor won't parse for you, like parsing on a trial dummy, for instance. So you can't really compare a dot build versus a direct damage build. But for the dot build, you can see how stats might build up or stack more efficiently than other stats. For instance, whether stacking max stat is better or worse than stacking weapon damage sources. There's very simple questions that, maybe you guys know over time, but there's very simple questions you can get more definitive answers. What is better to do, or what works better on your build, stacking with whatever crit chance you have, whatever percent modifiers you have, and maybe we can help you look through some of those or give you some examples of how to use this tool to better your builds. So I figure we'll do a little quick overview of the editor and things to look at, sort of get started. So generally, in a build, you're gonna have all these tabs to scroll through, and you got to fill out as much info as you can, as properly as you can, and know how those things sort of play into what the output is. Otherwise, for the general editor, you're gonna make an account to save your builds, and then you'll end up on this page where you can create a new build. Down at the bottom here, you see I have a bunch of old builds saved over the years. And then you have all these edit, and you can click over here to view the build as more of a stat page like you'd see in the game or superstar add-ons, that kind of stuff. For the most part, I always use this edit tool, right click, open new tab, and then we can open up multiple builds at the same time. And for instance, we could drag one of these off to the side and put them side to side, but we'll do that in a second. So we'll go over the first page, general page, build name, whatever you want, character name, whatever you want. You go through your race, class. Try to do your class like first. Sometimes with the subclassing, I completely forget about this now, and it really helps to have your class set in stone first before you go change it, and then it deletes all your skills. So try to fill out this first general page before anything else. If you're going to be in Cyrodiil, Battle Spirit, you want all that stuff kind of activated. You're going to click in Cyrodiil. CP, you might not want CP because you're playing BGs or building it for BGs. You can click the auto purchase race. Alliance doesn't really matter. If you want Vampire, Werewolf, click those. Rules version, this can help you. There's sometimes that if they're changing things in the editor, you might have to go through and like roll it back one patch, just because there might be weird interactions with sets that them fixing or changing stuff in the editor, they might break something. So if you find any weird interactions or sets not working like they're supposed to, there's a good chance it might have broken as they're changing the website. Attributes, I wish they put this in a different spot, but it's here, so you can distribute your attributes up to 64. This is a very important section down here, the target stats. This controls who you're fighting or who your stats, how the damage calculation gets taken place. So for here, the most important stuff is set the enemy's resist. If you're going to PvP, who's your target? Are you targeting squishy people? Are you trying to 1vx? Are you going after small pugs? Are you not caring about the tanky people and you're just avoiding them? Are you doing BGs where everyone at peak MMR is stacking the same resist? So here you want to get like, your average player value that you think you're going to come across. Same thing for crit resist. Do we assume everyone's running Rallying Cry this patch, or some other crit resist set? You'll want to slap that on there. Effective level. This is very important because if you're level 50, to convert resistances, essentially use a 500 to 1 sort of scale. So 1% mitigation equals 500 resists. If you're level 66, that makes it so 660 resists equals 1% mitigation. So this does play into future calculations down the line. Otherwise, all their other stats up here really don't matter. We don't need to care about them, but you can play around with percent HP if you're looking for other more specific niche calculations. But for now we're going to skip over that. Items page. This is pretty straightforward. There are some quick setup tools that you can play around with. I don't really use them. I just click through and select everything. Just for a quick overview, we can click here. You can type in, Balorg or whatever. Quality, you can pick legendary. Armor traits. Some items, like mythics, monomyth is a good example. We'll go here, mono. Website's lagging a little bit. Mono, you can't, if you select a trait like I'm gonna want this infused, sometimes it doesn't pop up, and it'll only pop up with the triune, because you can only get this set with a triune. So some things you might not want to enter the trait in if you can't see it. Otherwise, you can select enchant here, you'll delete the text, and click search, and you'll find all the enchants. You have your food slot down here. I'm not sure why they put food here on the build editor, but they did. Kind of, again, why I wish they had the attributes here. It'd be a lot easier. You can also see your bars here. There is another page for the bars. But essentially, you fill this out, get all your sets in place. And then, for some reason, they have a sets page on the other side. Click this, enable it how you want. All the sets have little different rules how they work. Like Balorg for ultimate, I can say I want, to assume 150 ult for Balorg, and it delivers that. And if you look on the right, you have your stats here. Just to make sure that sets work, you can turn sets on and off, like it turns stuns off, and it changes my effective power. So we'll leave everything on for now. Skills, you should have a general grasp how this works. It works just like ESO. The only thing in the editor right now, they're still missing the scripted skills. They have it coded, but they haven't added it to the build editor for some reason. I'm not sure why. To do subclassing is very hard to see, but there's these little pluses that you can change out your skills. So you can pick a different subclass. I'm going to leave it as this for now for the example. Go select your skills, your morphs. On the skills, there's this little 3 dots. We'll get to this later, but you can see all the coefficients for the skills obtained from in-game info in testing. You can see things like how they scale with weapon damage, how they scale with max stam, that sort of thing. Here's our buffs page. This is fairly straightforward, but very complicated at the same time. You have to go through and just really think about whether or not you have buffs. It gets harder in group play because you might have friends that have buffs, you might click it and enable it, and then you might come back another day and forget that you were doing or thinking of your friends being involved. Maybe you're trying to get more solo comparison data. And there are things you can use in here. For instance, this is PvP, but I have Minor Slayer enabled. If I'm doing like a Stam Sork, you want to make sure that all your passives count. For instance, Stam Sork has 5% physical damage. While it doesn't necessarily take into account in my effective power the physical damage aspect, so I'm losing 5% damage on my my total output. So what I do to account for that, if I'm doing all physical damage skills and know that that buff's going to apply, we'll go to our buffs page and I'll enable something that gives me 5% damage done. So I'll enable Minor Slayer. There's a few examples of that. You have to just make sure you're actually getting representative data for what you want. Just make sure all your buffs are counted, all your passives, like change your stats on the right. Fill it out. The other thing, don't mix up that up here there is like minor breach. This is minor breach on you, so this would be taking away your resist. If you want to do minor breach on an enemy, you scroll down here to the target section. Where was it? I'm not sure why the website's slow recently, but it has been slow. So you'd come here and say I do minor major breach. You can click it here. Sometimes it is auto-enabled by things like Sundered. And, there's off balance for you want to make sure if you're using off balance that that's enabled. And go through this, pick everything you want. Just make sure it's more representative of what you're doing in game. CP, pretty straightforward. Use all your slottables up top. It can kick out a final number, or if you can just buy all of them and then select the ones you want. There's little toggles down here to make sure they're enabled, so you can play with them if you want them turned on and off. Raw data tab, I honestly don't find this useful. You can look through it and see if you find anything useful, but I normally don't even bother with this. Mitigation tab, I'm not so sure about this data, whether or not you care to go off of this. Mainly because it's from a old calculator that was designed in 2016. And I know ZOS has messed with some stuff in the background, whether things stack additive, multiplicative, the works. Could just be old data. I'm not so sure about using this. You're better off just in-game, having a general idea of how much resistance stuff you want. All right, so let's do an easy example of a random question. Like for this build, we can look at the effective power over here on the right, and I'll click on the 3 dots. You can see everything plays into this. The effective power tells you what your output will be on a target. So in general, you can use this effective power to compare one direct damage build versus another direct damage build. Again, like I was saying with dot builds, you're almost better off parsing in-game for dot builds. And dot builds can still use the editor to play with stats and see what's more efficient, like for this gear set versus that gear set. But for all intents and purposes, let's assume we're playing a standard Stam Blade, the meta that we see right now. Some Stam Blade, Stam Sork kind of physical damage, generic build. So watch this effective power, and let's question the Mundus, right? We'll go to our general page where our Mundus should be. Is Shadow better than, weapon damage Mundus? So right here, we're at 11184. So remember that, 11184. Let's go over here, change our Mundus to the Warrior, 11155. So Warrior is technically slightly worse. And, you can see, that might change with crit. Do I have different crit buffs? Is it worth stacking those crit buffs? Those are all following questions. Do you go play around with that and see if you can get more crit, or if getting crit makes you lose something else? So it's really, you can go through and play with all these and question things. I'll just throw this back to Shadow so it's what it should be on this build. What's another good one? Let's go look at our weapons. Is the Maul the best? I don't know. Should we be using a greatsword? So let's look up Stoon. God, I wish the website wasn't lagging. Stoon, 2-hand sword, right? We're going to keep it a sharpen, so it's the exact same item. So we're at the 11184. What happens when we go to the sword? We'll click this. 11120. So the sword's actually less. The sword gets you healing from weapon damage, but we have no heals on that bar, so there's no point. What about the Great Axe? Let's look at Great Axe. It's going to lag a little bit. 11136, so it's still less than the Maul. Again, we don't... there's no crit healing from the axe anyway, so For this build, I mean, we're at 47% crit, and it's still showing the mall's better. So we'll go back to the mall. And there's all these questions you can, small, stupid answers that give you little benefits and builds that you can flush out on your own. Now, we're starting to get into questions like how to compare builds, right? I've already prepared an example so we can test this. So what we do is we could go up here to the top right and hit create a copy, and you'll get a copy in your builds list, which you can then open a second tab. And what we'll do is we'll move this tab over to the right and have our original build on the left. So this is an exact copy of the build, 11184, 11184. And let's, we can put them side by side, and this might make it easier to change, like maybe you'll try Nern. Oh, it's much less. We know not to do Nern on that bar. And this kind of helps just side by side look at things. So now this is more, let's look at a harder question. What happens if we change skills, like is Surprise Attack the best skill, or is Dizzy Swing maybe better? Of course, the website lagging doesn't help me. Oh, please. Let's see if we can get this on there. I might just have to skip this part. Alright, let's imagine we put Dizzy Swing in place of Surprise Attack. We'll do that. So let's open up the skills, go to our skills page, not subclassing. And remember those 3 dots I was talking about, the coefficients? If we take these coefficients, and we want to find the weapon damage coefficient, so let's open both the Dizzy Swing and weapon damage coefficient. The way to compare 2 different skills, because the weapon damage coefficients are different, we have to multiply those weapon damage coefficients against the effective power. So for instance, we have our 11184 times, we look for the off balance max damage. This is our max stat and our max weapon damage modifiers. We'll take the weapon damage coefficient times our effective power. So times 1.0846. And this gives us a rough number of how hard Surprise Attack is going to hit comparatively. If we do the same thing for Dizzy, 11184 times our Dizzy Swing, which is 1.2473, we see, oh, Dizzy Swing hits much harder. It's an extra almost 2k of damage. So now this gets even more complicated, because you could go and assume that Surprise Attack is going to crit, guaranteed. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, or if we go into our effective power, click the 3 dots. I clicked out of it. Now let's make our weapon crit 100%. So we assume we're going to get 100% crit rate. Well, now our effective power is drastically increased. So let's take our calculator, and we'll open another calculator. And it's just, again, just to compare what these will hit like. So you can take this effective power, 13826, times our Surprise Attacks coefficient again, 846. There we go. So now our critting, guaranteed crit Surprise Attack will hit for this much. So you can sort of weigh in, you can see how to compare things in different instances. It gets really complicated. But these are sort of tools you can go through and try to find ways to answer them yourself using this tool, where otherwise you couldn't in-game. Now, there are going to be times when you could just set up the build and go, parse on an ally. It's really hard in ESO because we don't have like a PvP training dummy. So we're not getting the right damage, or we're not getting the right resist calculations, because it's 500 to 1 armor to percent mitigation. We really need a PvP training dummy that does the level 66, 660 equals 1% MIT calculation. What else is there? I think that should get you a pretty good gist of how to use the editor and play around with it. I'm trying to think if there's anything really else to bring up. Oh, make sure when you're looking at the effective power, you're on the right bar, obviously. This drastically changes things. And then you really have to go through and just make sure all the passes are reading correctly. What else? I think that's basically it. We'd probably call it there. Try not to rant too much longer. So, let me know if this helps. Set up builds. I'll see if I can put a link to one of these builds or this build example. And then maybe in a following video, I'll show you how I set up a generic build and what sort of order I fill things out in. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll see you in, I don't know, maybe another year or two if the game's good. Alright, bye.